Hi, my name's Phil.
My name is Rob.
And we've been mates for years. We've done loads of stuff together.
All of which, mainly, have turned into chaos.
But someone then suggested, why don't you do a podcast? That seemed like a good idea, didn't it?
Really did.
Then we realised neither of us have ever done one of those. So is this going to work?
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
Welcome to Two Pastors in a Pod. So, Rob, why on earth are we wearing these masks?
Because this week is Retro Week.
Retro. Is that why you're dressed in that shirt?
We are going back to the 23rd of March 2020. What happened on the 23rd of March 2020?
Well, I'll tell you what, we were all wearing some of these, but let's take them off. I mean,
It's very hot there.
or maybe you could put that back on. That brings back some memories though, doesn't it?
You could never put your glasses on.
No, because they keep steaming up. They steamed up horribly, didn't they?
They steamed up. So yes, 23rd of March 2020. What happened then?
Well, what happened then was a phenomenon never seen, certainly in our lifetime, and probably since the Great Plague. We had a pandemic. We had a global pandemic. Did you know where that kind of originated in terms of British citizens? There was a Welsh student.
I thought it was in China.
Yeah.
Contentious.
There's a Welsh student who was studying in China who caught COVID, and he was the first British citizen to kind of start the conversation about this new disease that had suddenly turned up.
COVID-19, or in the early... You've got it. You've got it.
I've got a cough.
In the early days, it was called coronavirus, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was coronavirus. No one had ever heard of it. And what we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit later about, what difference that had made, from March 2020 or November, depending on when it was, through to the differences and how it changed people. But these things, I mean, do you know there's no official list of how many of these were produced? But according to the UN Trade Centre, there were enough of these produced that they made $166 billion worth of disposable masks, and 1.6 of them end up in the ocean.
A lot of people
Wouldn't have known that.
A lot of people made a lot of money.
Yeah, it was
Scylla would say a lot of people made a lot of money from things like this.
It was a proper dodgy time. But what we thought we'd do is, on this podcast, on this series, which we're really pleased that you guys have joined us, but we are going to be looking at how has life changed? How has society changed? And more especially, how did church change? I mean, it'd be great to be able to say we didn't change.
I think if you are part of a church, you will remember 4 years ago when everything changed overnight and we had to do church completely differently. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about that.
We are.
And then we're going to move into, well, what does the post-COVID church look like? Has it recovered? Have we learned anything?
I think it's going to be a really good area to look at. Before we get to that though, were there any good bits did you find in COVID at all for you personally?
Well, yeah, you covered your face in a mask.
That's very funny. I like that. Not. Because we've had people write in. We have had people write in, and
yes.
In fairness, there's been a number of ladies who've written in and say, could Phil look at the camera a bit more? Well, here I am, Leslie. I'm looking at the camera, which is awesome.
Yeah,
and could Rob speak a bit more, which is surprising.
Yeah, but if you look at the camera more, the kids will be frightened.
I doubt very much that'll happen. So you've got to talk a bit more, and I've just got to look a bit more. So that should work. One of the things, stop it. Hey, one of the things I loved about the first lockdown. Do you remember the first lockdown that we had? The weather was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was great because we did church online.
Yeah.
There was no church politics at all.
Initially,
everybody loved each other. There was no church politics, and we got to sit in our garden in the rurals, in the garden with a big mug of tea every single day. Me and the missus.
We did, I think, drink a lot more tea back in the day, 4 years ago.
Well, funny you should say
In fact,
that.
no, but I drank coffee. In fact, I've got a story about coffee drinking. Can I tell you now?
Yeah.
Before we
do the brew.
Before we do the brew, let me tell you my story in COVID about coffee. So this is after the first lockdown, and I think it was in May of 2020. Boris started to let us out a little bit, didn't he?
A little bit at a
So
time.
you could venture beyond your mile radius of your house. So Jill and I got in the car. We went into town. Costa Coffee was open downtown, but they were serving through a kiosk, so you couldn't go into the
On very long sticks.
yeah, you had to wear your mask. So we got a coffee, and then we went for a walk along the prom. So we had our little walk with our coffee, and we haven't finished our coffee, so we sat in the car. Next thing, the window.
Yeah.
A police lady
Yeah.
was there. What are you doing here? Well, I'm having a cup of coffee. Well, you can't stay here because I'm having a cup of coffee. I said, well, I went for a walk. Oh, you went for a walk?
Oh.
That's all right. That's in the rules. But can you believe that 4 years ago, I nearly got arrested for sitting in my car drinking a Costa coffee.
With your missus.
With me missus.
I tell you, see, the thing is, the rules were so complex.
It was
I'm
weird.
not sure anybody knew what the rules were at the end of the day. But we used to just sit. We never used to go out at all. We used to walk up the lane and back probably. But you were never sure whether that was the right thing to do, whether you were allowed to. But
It was a scary time.
what we
An
do,
unusual time.
what we do know is
We've got a brew.
we got a brew. Now, last brew we had turned out to be the most popular.
I liked last time. And Roger the Dodger.
Roger the Dodger.
He liked it as well.
Well, this one is from the same place, the same shop, because you could get two for the price of one.
Well, we talked about that.
Yeah, we
last
don't
time,
need to
didn't
look
we?
at that again. You could get two for the price of one, but this is very different to the last one. So have a smell of it, see what you think.
It's a bit unfair
Why?
because our producer, who's sat quietly in the corner,
He is sitting quietly in the corner.
he hasn't had a cup.
Well, look, there's some dregs there. You can have those at the end.
Okay.
So, now, I'm not sure about this one.
I always do the bouquet.
I'm just not sure whether
Mrs. Bucket. What was that TV series called? With Mrs. Bucket.
keeping up appearances.
That's it, yeah.
I'm not sure about this one. I'm not sure.
Actually, it's not bad. You're doing quite well lately.
Well, I don't like that one as much as last week's. Right, what do you reckon's in it?
Similar to last week.
What do you reckon's in it? I'll give you a clue. It's called Irish cream.
Irish cream.
It's called Irish cream.
Baileys?
No. Does it look like there's Baileys in it?
Well, you never know. Whiskey?
No, there's no whiskey in it either, funny enough. Come on, have a guess what you reckon is in that.
I might, you know what? I don't know. Tell me.
Black tea,
Black tea,
chocolate,
chocolate,
mint,
and mint.
and
Of course there is.
yeah, there's chocolate, mint, and black tea.
So where do you get this one from? For our viewers at home
Okay,
who are following our journey through the brews, where did you get this from?
Okay, this came from the very same shop in Chester that I happen to be at, and it's loose tea again. So we might go back to a tea bag next time, but it's in the same place. You can get it most places. It's called Irish Cream, and so go see where you can find it. Taste it. Send in some new brews.
We're not sponsored by them.
No, but send in
If you
some
want
new
to
ones.
sponsor us, that's fine as well.
Yeah, if you happen to own a tea shop and you've got loads of tea you'd like us to come and try out, we'll give you a bit of publicity. But this is Irish Cream.
Irish
Where would you rate it?
Oh, right, okay. It's probably about 7. I'm back to 7. I was up to 8 last week, but I'm back to 7.
See, I'd put that at a 6. I'm not so keen on that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not so
Well,
keen.
why don't you let me bring the next one?
Oh dear, you're a coffee drinker. That could be interesting.
You know, I'll bring
All right, you bring the next brew.
I'll bring the next one along.
And we'll go with that.
Because I'd hate for you to spend any more of your precious money.
I know my money is precious. Let's get back. So let's get back to
Let's get back to Retro Week.
now. As I say, we were in two very different churches.
We were.
When kind of COVID struck and all that. And in fact, when did you first realise that this was going to be a major problem.
Well, I think all of us were following the news, weren't we? For probably about 3 or 4 weeks before we were actually told to stay in our houses. So we've been talking about it as a leadership at the church about it for a few weeks now, and going through the whole what if scenarios. But I don't think any of us were really ready for the portcullis on our lives coming down. But,
See, for us it was a bit different. Me and T were on a cruise, supposedly up to Japan.
I remember you telling me about that. Actually.
And we got on the cruise ship, we got in our cabin, the cruise liner left, and we got an email just as we were leaving saying, if you don't want to go on this cruise, there's been an outbreak of a virus in China. And we're thinking, what's it got to do with us? And we can't get off the ship now anyway. But we ended up going around in a circle. In Asia, no one would have us. The Philippines wouldn't have us. Vietnam wouldn't have us. Japan wouldn't have us. Nobody would have us. And we went around for 9 days in a big circle. And by the time we flew back, bear in mind, when we went out, no one had ever heard of Wuhan or COVID or anything. When we came back, there were scanners and masks, and we sat on a plane coming back from Singapore with some woman coughing her guts up behind us.
Yeah.
And we got back and thought, what happened in the world? How did it all change?
It did.
So
Overnight.
By the time we got back to church,
Yeah.
people had already started going, what are we supposed to be doing? What are we supposed to be doing? So it's very different.
Big question.
Yeah.
Did you get your money back?
No, what we got.
You didn't get compensation for going round and round and round the whole of Asia.
What we actually got was a cruise credit for another cruise. So we did that.
You did get compensation.
We did. But to be honest, we wanted to go to Japan and we never got there.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, so we got back, and unlike cities, I guess, rural folk tend to have a little bit more of a laid back attitude to kind of national global stuff. And so we weren't that worried, but as you say, suddenly things change very quickly.
Well, as a church, I think the best way to describe it is that we went onto a war footing, if you like.
Okay.
So we met as a leadership. We via the new format of church meetings, because we couldn't meet together.
Yeah.
We couldn't say, all right, let's get down to the church and meet together. We had to do this thing called Zoom. Now, I thought Zoom was a song.
Oh, you're showing your age there.
Back to the 80s.
Yeah, mate.
Can you remember the first line?
Zoom, just
Anyway,
one look, and then
My heart
went boom.
Anyway,
there you go.
it wasn't that Zoom. It was not that Zoom.
Had you ever done a Zoom meeting before?
Never, ever done a Zoom meeting in my life.
I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
No.
Not a clue.
But we organised it. So, fortunately, in every church,
Yep.
there's a tech ed.
Do you know, I'm sure the Lord saves tech heads delivery, a bit like Nathan.
We've got a tech ed here, haven't we?
I'm sure the Lord saves them just to be tech heads.
Yeah, so there was a tech ed who was able to sort us all out and get us on Zoom. So we would meet quite regularly. And in fact, through the whole of lockdown, we would meet more regularly than we did before. So we went into this kind of war footing. We knew we couldn't go to church. We were looking at what other churches were doing. We were looking at what the government was saying, and then we had to make a decision because different churches were doing different things. And that was a bit of a problem. However,
Did you ever consider still doing church although the government told you not to meet? Did you ever have that debate?
well, I think we all had that thought, didn't we? But again, that's what the plurality of a leadership is all about, isn't it? So the collective minds of the fellows who were leading our church was, no, we need to stick to government guidelines. Other churches decided to go a different way, but that's what we did. So we did.
Well, we did something similar. We had a debate as elders about should we kind of break the law because it impinged on, and then we had a pastoral concern for everyone else. So we started our services online.
Yeah.
Now, again, God blessed us with a tech ed who was freelance, who had no work. So that was good because we were able to employ him.
Yeah.
And we did our services online, but the decision was taken. This was only going to be for 3 or 4 weeks. We'll set the bar really high with the style of service. We'll really throw everything at it to make sure it's a really good service. 3 weeks, we can do that. 2 years on, we were beginning to struggle, I can tell you. But most of us thought this will only be a couple of weeks. This can't be a
we
long
were
term
we
thing.
were the same. So we very quickly got organised around doing video recordings of services. So initially, it didn't go out live on YouTube. We would record it and then we would put it out there on YouTube, and that worked well for a while. But then it just went on and went on. and went on. I think we got better at doing it, but we just thought, when's this going to end?
So you told me the other day that your first service that you put out online,
Yeah.
how many people listened?
Well, this is back to this war footing.
Yeah.
So it was new for everyone. People were really concerned. There was a fear in the atmosphere, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Are we going to catch this virus? Does it mean that I'm going to die? There were people that we were hearing about who were getting really sick and going into hospital. And we, you know, as a family, we lost. Well, my wife lost. Her cousin lost her husband at very early days from coronavirus. So it was very real, and people were scared. So we just I forgot what we were talking about.
How many people tuned in your first service?
So you say it's my age.
It is.
It's the tea. It's the tea.
Really the tea.
Or it could have been the jabs that we had, but that's another subject. So how many people? Yes. So what happened was people became very evangelistic.
Yeah.
So for the first time ever, they were sharing everything on the internet. So everything that was said or done on YouTube was shared by the whole congregation. So we had over 1,000 hits on my first sermon that I did on YouTube.
So, first sermon, they heard you, 1,000 people for the first time. Did that remain as it was, or did someone kind of go, "Oh,
I think
I've listened to that one"?
Yeah. As we got used to the war, as I call it,
Okay.
our enthusiasm
Right.
wavered a little. Whether it was my preaching, I'm just getting in there before you say it. Whether it was my preaching, I don't know. But yeah, the enthusiasm waned a little bit, and so the number of views dropped off as people got used to it, and perhaps people weren't as scared as they were.
I tell you what.
But what I would say is that I missed that. I missed that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
In the church for sharing the gospel. So, for instance, we do this.
Yeah, we do.
We every Sunday we have our the services recorded, but just how many people are sharing?
Yeah. I mean, we found from our perspective, our services weren't recorded in a church because we don't have one, or didn't have one. We still don't. But it was recorded in the shop that the church owned, and we brought people in via their own kind of webcams and so on. But we started with certainly a higher level than numerically than our congregation was by quite a way. But we maintained that. The danger for us was that people got very used to. In fact, they enjoyed coming to church in their pajamas with a broom.
Well,
they really did.
Yeah, no.
Now I know in Liverpool they walk around with their curlers in their hair and their pajamas on the middle of the day. No. But in normal places, that's not the norm.
Yeah, no. They could have a cup of tea. They could if they wanted when we weren't live. Fast forward.
Apparently they used to quite regularly in that service.
Often people will be there in the pajamas, so I was told.
Yeah.
But well, that was the fun side of it.
But also they got families together and they sat in their front room as a family. People really, really enjoyed that kind of convenience.
Yes.
And I know when COVID restrictions came to an end, we started going back to church. That was a whole new ball game.
Well, again, because initially we were restricted, weren't we? So I think the rule was at first you could have 30 in the building.
Yeah, we went from a lockdown to 30 to another lockdown. I don't know about you. Did you go back to church with the 30?
Yeah, so we had to come up with a way of restricting access. So it was kind of almost a lottery. People had to.
Did you win much?
The tech heads won the day because they had some gizmo that you could log on to and then just book your place in church. Yeah. So first come, first served, and then you can book for the week after. So all of that was done. But it was. I remember going for the first service. With a live congregation again.
It's nice to have a live congregation.
Who were sat there in masks.
Do you know how many churches haven't got a live congregation?
We were the only ones who were allowed to take our masks off, but they were there sat there in masks, and it was strange. But it was good because we were back together, but still strange. And I did weddings as well. Weddings in COVID were really strange. So my own daughter had to get married in the third lockdown.
I joined in that wedding online.
You did, and that's what we did. Yeah. So she was only allowed, I think it was 15, which was mad, 15 people. But we had Zoom, so we Zoomed it on the back screen. So it was, and it was the first wedding I ever done in the evening.
And can I ask whether that was a cheaper wedding than any of your other daughters?
I saved hack
See,
it.
there was another benefit. A cheap wedding.
Thank you, Boris.
Yeah, see, Boris had it. I've got to be honest, when we met together, we met back in the town hall in Ellesmere.
Yeah.
And the town hall had sectioned off individual areas.
Yeah.
And we had the 30 there, and I sat at the front
Yeah.
with a clear mask on. They were by far the hardest services I have ever done in 30 years of ministry.
Very, very difficult.
Really difficult.
Funerals. Did you take any
Yeah, I
funerals?
took 2.
Yeah, well, I took
And
about,
they are so sad.
I took about 8 funerals.
Did you?
Yeah, in the community. And the one that I remember was a lady who came to church. Her husband died, who I knew and had visited. And anyway, he died, and it was during the height of COVID. So the daughter lived up in the Lake District, and she wasn't allowed to come and see her mum when her dad died. On the day of the funeral, she was allowed, because you could travel on a funeral, but you had to have paperwork. So she had to apply for paperwork to travel from the Lake District down to Liverpool. She couldn't go into her mum's house because she wasn't in mum's bubble. So we all met at the crematorium, and again in the crematorium it was so impersonal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not great in the best of times, is it?
No, but these were by
But
far
again,
the worst.
Even family members were segregated, except if you were in a bubble, and they were 2 meters apart, and then they couldn't gather afterwards. All they could do was gather in the open air in the park opposite the crematorium. That for me was the saddest part about COVID.
I mean, funerals are difficult at the best of the times, but they were heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And there's a knock-on effect from that. Those who've not been able to say goodbye and hadn't been able to say goodbye and still have that in the back of their mind of loved ones.
Yeah.
I mean, whether we like it or not, as I say, we live in a post-COVID, but also a post-religious society now, and we know attendances at church, nosedived naturally.
Yeah.
Now those are starting to creep up considerably.
Yeah.
Now, but it's 4 years on. But whether we like it or not, church changed.
Yeah.
People changed.
Yeah.
In lots of ways, and we talked in different ways. I mean, during COVID, we had lots of those kind of little sayings, didn't we? Those things the government kept telling us. What were those list of things that you came up with? The words.
Well, there was those hands.
Hands, face, and...
Hands, face was the mask, and then space.
Hands, face, and space.
Boris had them in front of him, didn't it? Hands,
Yeah,
face.
not literally in front
and
of him, but yes.
space, and then stay at home.
Yeah, and your bubble.
In your
How
bubble.
big could your bubble be?
was
Who
one-
could be in it? Who couldn't?
There was one about saving the NHS, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Stay safe, save the.
We
But
clapped out on a Wednesday,
do
was
you
it?
remember
Tuesday.
that?
Yeah, we stood on and
It was either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
We went outside and we
we did a bit of clapping and
we clapped, and some people got out there with the saucepans and they were banging away on the
you realise these are stories we're going to tell our grandkids.
When we're talking about it now, and I'm sure people at home are
mad.
listening thinking, how crazy, and I'm sure everyone at home has got a story or two about COVID, and some of them will be very, very sad stories. But yeah, coming back to church.
Yeah, what about church now? I mean, if you look at church now, we can't say it hasn't changed because it has. And for you personally, now we've spoken to a number of pastors in different parts of the country and youth pastors, and we'll get some feedback from them in a moment. But for you personally, can you see the change within church?
I think the biggest change for me was in amongst our young people. Because I think they had been or have been the slowest to get re-engaged in church life. I think I'm a school governor, and I was at a meeting last night, and we were talking about the special education needs children, which has gone up quite significantly since COVID. I know from one of my own grandchildren that he, his first years of school should have been in those years, but he was kept at home with the family, and I think that has had a knock-on effect. And you hear that from teachers as well, and in church life as well. Coming back to the youth work has been slow.
Yeah.
Very, very slow.
One of the
But it
youth
starts
pastors
to pick up again.
Yeah, one of the youth pastors that we contacted said this. He told us that young people who lived their teenage years through the pandemic seem to have been the most affected in church life as well. There's an increased trust issue that they saw politicians saying one thing, doing something else, and that those who you would look to as leaders, that there's a trust issue, that they've also struggle in much deeper pastoral needs. He said they struggle with respect, with discipline, social enabling. Is now much more difficult amongst those who kind of grown up. So those kids who are now kind of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18, that group, that Generation X is really struggling with all the things that you and I, when we were kids, would have taken for granted.
COVID has had a real effect on the younger generation, particularly, but also on the older folk within the congregation. So there's still a fear. So when people have the common cold now, people tend to stay away a lot earlier.
Bit like you.
Bit like me.
If you get a sniffle, you're in bed with a man flu.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
But yeah. So people just with the minor ailment. Oh, I'm protecting you. Which is okay. It could be legitimate, but there was none of that. There was none of that before. So people. And also because we're still we're not live streaming, but many churches are still live streaming.
Well, we deliberately didn't live stream for good reason. The reason we didn't live stream is because people were so keen on just having it online that they wouldn't return to face to face. And I still think that was probably.
I think it's an interesting debate because many churches still live stream, and they began live streaming through COVID, and they've kept it up. And their argument is that they're reaching a bigger audience. And they're reaching folk who would normally do church at that time, who still want to do church at that time, but are able to tune in.
But that's not what the Bible talks about. It talks about don't give up meeting
together,
and that's a physical thing. Now that doesn't mean we will never go live streaming. Certainly 4 years on, we probably will. But it's the meeting together of brothers and sisters.
I think we have to remember that the church is not just a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening.
It's the people.
The church is the people. So as we gather, we talk, we converse, we encourage one another. We meet around a cup of tea at the end of the service. You know, not necessarily this cup of tea.
Never know.
Proper tea. We meet around and we we encourage one another and we talk about the works that we're doing in church. So it's an informal meeting of encouraging, and we're going around press ganging people into doing stuff like Nathan. But if you're not there, you're not really part of it.
You've got to be consistent. I think that's for any Christian. The missing out of fellowship with other believers is not what God wants to do. Can I quote another? This is a pastor from a large church in London talking about how the local church changed. Says this, that whilst there were some real positives, and undoubtedly that came out of the pandemic, in terms of technology being used, in terms of the flexibility without a building. Churches get kind of hooked into buildings, Christians do particularly. The flexibility and creativity in presenting the gospel. He says this, however, it seems now that personal well-being trumps everything. And the doctrine of the local church has been dropped out of Christians' priorities. In other words, it's kind of the legacy where another pastor, this is from a rural perspective, says that coming to church now it has to fit in. It fits in, spirituality fits in around family, work, and our social diaries, and that's kind of where church fits in now. And that's a knock-on effect from COVID.
Well, I don't know whether it's a knock-on effect from COVID. I think that was starting to happen.
Well, it must have accelerated.
Yeah, it was starting to happen before COVID. So other things would take priority in family life over and above the meeting together of God's people. That was starting to creep in. I mean, I've been a Christian 40 years now. I've been in the ministry 20 years.
You must have half become Christian young.
Oh, you're right, yes. And you've been in the ministry, how many years?
30 years.
So over those 30 years, you see that, don't you?
Yeah.
People go away for more weekends, again for legitimate reasons, but church and the gathering used to be a top priority.
In your diary, that was the thing. Sunday, this is what we do. This is what we do as a family, and then we have the rest of the Lord's Day to do what we want.
But we don't see as much of that now, and whether COVID has influenced that may well be. It may.
The culture's kind of altered.
Could have accelerated it a little bit.
Do you think we've learned any lessons from COVID?
I think, as you said there, I think the technology has been brilliant, and we've learned how to do things a lot, a lot more quicker. That's a terrible
Quicker?
English. Terrible.
Quicker?
Quickly. I'm Scouser. Anyway, so for instance, the Zoom meetings that we have. So again, we're able to quite quickly get together, because in a rural church particularly, we're spread out over we're at least 20-30 minutes away from each other, aren't we? So we're able to say, right, we need to get on Zoom, we've got this to do.
But you know the best thing about the elders meetings, because we're too tight to buy a system, in 40 minutes you've got to be done.
Yeah.
Which is great. I like
it. It does. It keeps us to
It does keep us to
So
time.
the technology side has been brilliant. So we're more online now, which
retired
is a good
minister-
thing, but it's also a bad thing, isn't it?
See, a retired minister of mine says one of the things that's good has come out of the pandemic is that there is a realisation that human life is frail,
Yeah.
and that there is a frailty in human life, and that life is short.
Yeah.
Now that should stir us as Christians to share the gospel more. None of us should want to go to heaven on our own, but the fact that our days are short, and the scriptures say, don't they, make the most of every moment.
But you know, we really did engage with that at the start.
Yeah,
of
we
the
did, yeah.
pandemic, and through as we were seeing thousands of lives being lost every single day, and it was on our news. We engage with this sense of urgency. But why should that be any different? Every single day in the UK, people are heading into eternity. Every single day.
The amazing
and
thing
yet,
is...
yet we've lost that urgency. Back to what I said at the start. How many people now share our services on the internet?
Yeah.
How many people share your church service? Maybe you're listening to this. Have you shared your church service like you did in the pandemic? I think we've lost that edge that we had at the start, and we need to get that back. Roger was on about that last week.
The reality is, Jesus can come tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Jesus could turn up tomorrow, and again, the Bible says, will he find faith on the earth? So never mind whether there's a pandemic coming, you know, what are we doing about the end of the world? So just as we kind of close out, what would you say, can we as a church leaders, as Christians, can we prepare for such an event in the future? It's unlikely to happen in our lifetime, I guess, but can we prepare for that?
I think we're already prepared now.
You think we're ready to go?
I think having been through the crisis and having learned through the crisis, we are set to go in one respect. It could be a completely different crisis, mind you, in which case it's back to the drawing board. But if that ever did happen again, and I really don't think it will, because I don't think we would accept
it would be a very different set of circumstances.
The lockdown.
Yeah.
But if it did, we are prepared. But I think we need to get back to that sense of urgency in church life.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things you need to get back to is maybe wearing a mask more often, which would look great. So that's the end of our podcast for today. However, if you want to keep in touch, email us. Email us with some new brews, because we're running out. Tell Rob what he needs to do. Email in some questions for us. Maybe we can pick those up. Maybe something we've said about post-COVID church. Your experience could be completely different.
And let us know whether you're happy with him looking at the camera all the time.
I think it works a lot better.
Yeah.
So here's till next time, Nick.
Indeed.
See ya.